Thank you. When the leaked draft of the Supreme Court ruling that, if carried through, would pave the way to strike down Roe versus Wade, meaning that abortion would become illegal in many states, including here in Michigan, several people asked me if or when I was going to address the issue from the Bima. Some of those people were anxious for me to address it, and some of those people were anxious for me not to address it. Welcome to the life of a rabbi. I chose not to address it immediately for two reasons. One, I wanted to be able to put some thought into how to best address such a divisive topic. But number two, much more important, if I'm going to speak about an issue in society of social justice, I feel it's important to have an action that we can take. Otherwise, it can leave people feeling frustrated with no outlet to affect change. And if nothing else, Judaism is a religion of action. Mitzvot, commandments, are our tools for holy living and revealing God's light in the world. They're actions we take, they're not feelings that we just hold on to. But the time has come for me to address this subject in a way that reflects the deep and nuanced tradition to which we've been entrusted as guardians for ours and future generations. While American law speaks in terms of rights, the right to life, the right to choose, Jewish law and ethics and values speak in terms of obligations. What obligations does a woman have for her own well-being? What obligations might she have towards the potential life growing inside of her? And what do we, as members of her community, do or have to do to help her fulfill those obligations? So we speak in terms of obligation. Our journey to understanding this must begin with the very first command given to humanity and later reiterated to Jewish people. The first command in Genesis given to humanity says, Pru orvu umilu et haaretz. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. There is no doubt in Judaism that having children is a mitzvah. Each new person brought into existence represents a whole new world with endless potential for good. This is so important in Judaism that if you are a citizen of the state of Israel, the massive, and I mean massive, expense of fertility treatments is covered by the state, by the country. Almost 100%. There's no argument that Judaism loves Jewish babies. Jewish teenagers, that's something else. But to have a Jewish baby, there must first be a pregnant woman who is able to carry a fetus until the moment it enters the world as a new being. But what happens when there is something that prevents that fetus from coming to fruition as a human being? In the book of Exodus, we learn about a case where two men are fighting, and one of them hits a pregnant woman and causes her to lose her pregnancy. The Torah tells us, if no other damages, and the word is ason, if no other damages are done to the woman other than the loss of the pregnancy, then the result is that it is viewed as an assault on the woman, and there are associated penalties with an assault. The Torah goes on to say that if there are damages to the woman, ason, it uses the word again, then the penalties for the damage to the woman should be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, etc. Now the issue here is that word ason was translated in the first Greek translation of the Torah, the Septuagint, not as the word damage, but as the word form of the fetus. So in that reading, it would say, if there is not damages, but if there is form to the fetus, then it is life for life, tooth for tooth, eye for eye. But that's a mistranslation. Because the Torah says, if there are damages to the woman, then there is reparation. And so we learn that abortion, the loss or cause of loss of a child, of a fetus, is not murder. The Torah doesn't see the loss of the fetus as anything other than bodily harm to the woman. And based on this, the Talmudic sages conclude that until day 40 of a pregnancy, whatever is inside of the woman is mai be'alma, liquid to the world. It is nothing other. Now, I'm not saying that that's not traumatic, but it is considered pure liquid. Nothing else. After 40 days, until the moment that the head and the majority of the body of the fetus has emerged, the Talmud declares, Ubar yerech imo. The fetus is the same as the thigh of the mother, which means that halachically, it is part of her body. And she is obligated to care for it as she would any other part of her body. Judaism says we don't get tattoos because we care for our body. Judaism says we don't self-mutilate because we care for our body. But it is a part of her body. But what happens when a part of a person's body threatens the life of the rest of the body? We know that the number one highest value in Judaism is to preserve life at almost any cost. And thus, we know that should doctors find a cancerous growth or a gangrene limb or anything else that might potentially threaten the life of that person, Jewish law mandates that it be removed from the body. Period. Based on this concept, our sages conclude that if the fetus is a threat or a risk to the well-being of the mother, then it should be removed because the mother's life takes precedence over that of the fetus, even in extreme cases up till the moment of birth. And so the question for the rabbis and sages within Jewish tradition is one of balance and interpretation. How broadly do you define well-being of the mother? Is it only if, God forbid, she'll die if the pregnancy isn't terminated immediately? What about if there's a medical risk that will only unfold over the course of weeks or months, and then it's too late? We can do something now, or we can wait until it's an emergency. To what extent do we consider emotional and psychological damage and distress? Well, I'm honored and privileged to be a rabbi who wrestles with our rich tradition and can address these issues with a sense of gravity and humility. My voice is only relevant to the extent that it's based on the experience of women and the guidance of medical experts, and I am not a medical expert. I will never presume to second guess what is within the heart of a particular woman who might be facing the soul-wrenching choice that I will never have to make for myself. I can talk in theory, but it is not my body or well-being on the line. Likewise, putting those decisions in the hands of clergy of a different faith, or legislators, or police and prosecutors, will not accomplish a holier and more moral outcome, and in fact, will lead to a reality that our freedom to practice our religion, a religion that honors, values, and celebrates life, will be put in extreme jeopardy. More than that, women facing physically, mentally, or emotionally dangerous pregnancies that cannot under any circumstances, no matter what, be able to bear a viable child, and victims of rape and worse, and even women who suffer a partial miscarriage that must be completed through medical intervention, will be at extreme risk for death. About 1/3 of all pregnancies end in a natural miscarriage. And I know plenty of couples who have felt that distress of having their hopes of having a healthy child taken from them. Imagine if the sadness of that loss is compounded, as that miscarriage is not just a medical emergency, but also a criminal investigation, as will be the case in Michigan when the 1931 abortion ban goes into effect the day the Supreme Court issues its ruling. And thus, our religion, a religion based on holy actions called mitzvot, actions that allow us to build a better word, demands that we protect the lives of women, which is why our sisterhood, in partnership with the National Council of Jewish Women of Michigan and the other organizations, has taken up the charge to get a state constitutional amendment protecting the right of women to receive an abortion on the ballot for the November election. And to get it on the ballot, we need over 400,000 signatures on the petition. And thus, I'm encouraging you to sign this petition that will be in the synagogue office for the next 2 weeks until we reach its deadline. Because it's the only way we can guarantee our right to practice our religion. It's the only way we can guarantee the safety of our wives, our sisters, our daughters, our nieces, and our friends who could be at risk if these rights are taken away. As a proud citizen of the United States, I understand that the Constitution is the source of our rights, but as a religious person, I believe that God is the source of what is right. As this debate unfolds in our society, I refuse to stand in God's place, and I refuse to allow others to stand there as well. Despite others' religious convictions that are often based on a mistranslated word, it's my job to ensure that God's word is not claimed exclusively by those who have not read it in its original form. The Torah teaches, "Uvachartem b'chaim, leman tichiyeh ata v'zarecha." Choose life so that you and your children shall live. We are a people, we are a religion and a nation that time and again chooses life, uvachartem b'chaim. We understand and celebrate the blessings that each new life brings to this world. And yet, in this verse, the Torah places you before your children. Well, there's no doubt that fetal life has value and meaning, as anyone who has ever lost a pregnancy can tell you. The verse tells us that we must first protect the lives of those who have been born, so that then they will have the opportunity to allow others to be born as well. Shabbat Shalom.